Hey guys, how's it going? Companion here. So today I want to talk about survivability in Path of Exile. Because even if you're playing, on standard, just screwing around and all that stuff, it's still pretty important that your character doesn't die. And there's some concepts that I have kind of, derived from the game that I want to share with you guys, and maybe you guys take something from it and maybe change a few things to your character to make it a little bit stronger. So I keep telling people like, yeah, CI is this, CI is that. Life sucks, and that's mostly true as far as Onslaught is concerned, largely because there is no combs on Onslaught. I made an example yesterday of how I think things work in this game is, you pick a skill, you make a build around it. If you're playing on Onslaught, maybe 8 or 9 out of 10 times that build is better as Energy Shield, so as a CI-based character or a Chevrons-based character. And maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 times it's better as life. And typically when it's better, it's not better by much, but often when CI is concerned, it can be a lot better. The flip side of that is, if you include combs, if you consider the fact that you're playing on standard or on hardcore, this changes quite a bit because combs does add a lot to life builds. The number of, optimized life builds for any given skill is probably closer to 3 or 4, maybe even 5 out of 10 as opposed to the remaining in CI. So that's kind of how I think things work. But the reason I think this stuff works this way is because in this game, one of the large components to survivability is surviving burst damage. And this is typically damage done by bosses or by really nasty monsters in really nasty maps. So, while I'm going to talk, I'll throw you guys some footage of screwing around with Merciless Vol on Onslaught with my Discharger, and this is a CI-based character without a shield, and he has pretty much no armor on his gear. It's just all from iron reflexes. So in this game there are some really big hits. They're all designed so you can survive them as life if you have enough life and if you stack enough defenses, except for maybe a few in really dangerous maps. But even things like the Vol Smash and a Maze Vol, which is a level 74 version of the Vol that you're seeing now, which probably does at least double the damage, is still survivable on a life-based character, and the game is designed this way. So, life-based character who can pretty much max out around maybe 5k life, maybe a little bit more than that, can have enough defenses to not get one-shotted. But there is something in this game that a lot of people do. They like to Alt F4 or leave the game if they're in trouble, because the login on Path of Exile is instant. So what typically happens to a life-based character who takes a huge hit, they go from 5k to 1k, and they're like, oh shit, and they get the fuck out of the game. But if you're a CI-based character or a hybrid-based character or some more interesting builds out there where you have a large portion of your life as an energy shield or your entirety of your survivability energy shield, you can have 10k. So if you go from 10k to 6k, it just prance around a little bit while it regenerates back. So that's kind of the preliminary concept that derives people with the opinion that I share, that CI is a lot more powerful in this game because burst damage is in fact the biggest problem. There are things to counter burst damage. A lot of people say that armor is the way to go, and armor does go a really long way, but when it comes to really big hits, armor is not enough. You can't mitigate like a Vol Smash with just armor. You have to have endurance charges. Endurance charges are really powerful because they add percentage mitigation to your mitigation value. Now, mitigation value, like how much armor the hit is reduced by, is proportional to the hit. A bigger hit will not be reduced by very much, and as a result you need endurance charges to augment your mitigation value. So if your mitigation value against any typical monster is, let's say, 80%, but against a Brutus Smash it's 50%, you want a bunch of endurance charges to bring that 50 to, I don't know, let's say 70, because that's a pretty big difference. You're taking almost half the damage away from having 5 or 6 endurance charges, and this gets ramped up as your armor goes up. So high armor is good, but high armor is really good if you use endurance charges. That's typically how this game works on the physical damage front. The other side of the coin is the elemental damage. The elemental damage you take in Path of Exile can often be substantial. In groups, it's typically higher because you may do maps with chain, you may do maps where other people aggro monsters that actually end up hitting you as a result. So there are some dangerous possibilities there where a solo character is not quite as vulnerable against projectile attacks as you are in a group. But the preliminary damage of range attacks is the elemental kind, and the elemental kind can be really, really brutal. When you're typically doing a map and it's not a very difficult map, there's no minus max, your resistor capped, you can pretty much just wander through the map and do whatever you want, pop a few health pots, typically no big deal. The issue comes when physical damage is scaled with elemental. So you may know this in the game when you make like a marauder or something, smack some mobs around with ground slam, you use added fire, damage goes up a lot because your physical is increased by a multiplier elemental value. So this also occurs in the game. When you see a rare monster which says like deals extra cold damage, what that means is it has extra cold damage as a percentage of its physical base damage. So this is very important because when you're running around through maps and you see Roas do quite a bit of damage, and then you get a bunch of armor and then Roas don't do that much damage anymore and you're also happy. But the base damage of a Roa is really high. So if a Roa has like additional damage as cold, maybe additional damage as fire as well on a rare monster, and you're doing it in a minus max map, so your resist instead of being at 75 or 50, so they're half as effective, those monsters are going to hit for a tremendous amount of damage. And that's one of the main risks in this game. That's kind of the only damage that cannot be mitigated. So, if you are a life build, if you don't have that much life, if you're like 3k something, you're probably not going to get one-shot by most things in this game. But you're not going to be able to mitigate the elemental scaled melee hits as you can mitigate the pure physical base hits with your endurance charges. This is very important because this is why CI is strengthened again. CI does have this pool. It has a larger pool. You can take higher bursts before you have a chance to react to what's going on. Now, this also goes into the armor versus evasion thing, which is also important when considering survivability. So evasion is very good because it's systematic, it's not useless, but armor typically is better. So the reason it's better is because you scale it with endurance charges, it's more consistent, but evasion can help you against elemental damage. So while not a lot of builds out there that use evasion for evading attacks, they typically use it to scale armor, there is the notion that you can scale survivability and you can scale evasion to kind of mitigate down this damage. But the problem with evasion is to spend the points that you spend to get it up there typically costs you life and typically costs you energy shield, and actually typically costs you more life than energy shield if you choose one or the other, and as a result your total health pool is reduced. So that's why evasion is not really the best choice. But there's a lot of different things out there that you can choose. In Path of Exile you can build a character however you can imagine it, but the parameters of the survivability typically dictate the build. When you make a build, you want to maximize survivability and you want to minimize the commitment to DPS nodes, and that's typically the balance that people try to achieve in builds, and what separates a very good build from a mediocre one is the ability to do damage with fewer nodes, the ability to gain survivability with fewer nodes. The node efficiency is what dictates the stronger builds, and this is always with survivability in mind. So that's kind of how things work in Path of Exile. I hope you guys learned something. Everything in this game is pretty much viable if you really optimize it, save for a few skills, but in the end you really have to make an effort to optimize your builds to get the most out of them on both the damage front and their survivability front. So that's how it is, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.